There's no feeling more intense than starting over.
Is a line that we can all relate to. Although from my personal experience, I can barely force myself to start doing anything, the feeling of losing hours of progress on something you value is devastating. If you're not the person that can deal with this isn't the game for you. Getting Over It is a game made by Bennett Foddy, an Australian-American game designer who was only really recognized for being the creator of Co-op, which is another rage-inducing game with especially bad controls. Bennett is trained as a moral philosopher on topics of drug addiction, and he was also a bassist in the electronic music group Cut Copy. He taught himself to program and design games in 2006, from online tutorials while working on his philosophy dissertation. Bennett has made many games. His most popular work is Co-op and Getting Over It. Most of the games he has made are difficult, and that's because his memories from games come from his youth, when games were usually a lot more brutal towards the player. Bennett did not intend for his games to connect with his philosophy work, but there were similarities between his use of reward-punishment cycles and the motivations behind addiction. Bennett got his 15 minutes of fame after Co-op got attention from websites like Reddit and YouTube in 2010, but it was nothing compared to the popularity Getting Over It achieved. The game was made for the Humble monthly subscription from Humble Bundle on October 6, 2017. The game was released on Steam on December 6, 2017, after a whopping 2.7 million players had downloaded the game from Humble Monthly, with the release on iOS the same day and the release on Android on April 25, 2018. The game won the Innovation Nuovo Award at the Independent Games Festival in 2018, and Bennett got $5,000 as prize money, which isn't that much considering the game has sold 2.8 million copies on Steam alone. While some people know the game from the painstaking experience firsthand, most know it from the funny loud people who have the hair color with the power to blind anyone on sight.
A definite yes.
The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the C.S. Lewis.
Getting Over It was inspired by a rather unknown game titled Sexy Hiking.
This game is a homage to a free game that came out in 2002 titled Sexy Hiking. The author of that game was Jazuo, a mysterious Czech designer who was known at the time as the father of B games. And B games are rough assemblages of found objects. Designers slap them together very quickly and freely, and they're often too rough and unfriendly to gain much of a following. They're built more for the joy of building them than as polished products.
While Sexy Hiking is a B game, that doesn't mean that Getting Over It is a B game. Getting Over It has weird controls and annoying map design, but Sexy Hiking is about as polished as a rotten orange. The game increases in difficulty as you progress, and while the obstacles aren't hard, they become hard if you try to rush everything. The entire point of the game is to take things slow, cause the faster you go, the more mistakes you make. This doesn't stop speedrunners though, with the record sitting at an impressive 1 minute and 1 second, being run by a guy who has so many mods installed to give Skyrim a run for its money. You start the game at the very bottom of the mountain, with a tree in front of you. The obstacle is the basic introduction to the game. There's simple ledges to grab onto so you can get a feel for the hammer. After the tree, the ascent begins. One mistake usually means falling down to the very bottom. After a bit, you reach the first hardstuck point for most players, the Devil's Chimney. It's a very tight section that requires you to know how to move correctly, but it's not that hard compared to the other sections. The construction site is a pretty easy part, a simple wall climb up to the top. The playground is a spot where every single player gets stuck for a while. Tricky jumps, weird obstacles, and a pit that leads you to the 7th ring of hell. But Bennett made an oopsie, and with a rather simple jump you can just skip the entire section. After a very safe but weird area, the living room, you have reached the orange hell.
I don't know its part.
It's a very well made part that emphasizes on the point of going safe and slow, but these rocks have hurt me on such a spiritual level that I can never forgive them. The church spooky, but generally easy, and the next few jumps are hard but with zero risk of falling down. Snowballs are rather simple, but they have the looming threat of falling down. The bucket is a tricky part, with a terrifying snake which has the power to make grown people cry. The ice mountain's tricky, but easy when you know what to latch onto. And the last climb is pretty annoying, but easy to pass after you know what you're doing. that is the basic gist of the game. Now that we have the basic understanding of what is getting over it, we can talk about what does the game mean. Getting over it is about never giving up and beating an obstacle. The game is designed to be frustrating, and the developer acknowledges that. The frustration is a very important part of why the game is remembered so vividly. I feel like Bennett wants his game to be remembered, and the frustration the game presents helps with that.
Everything's fresh for about 6 seconds, until some newer thing beckons, and we hit refresh. And there's years of persevering disappearing into the pile, out of style, out of sight. In this context, it's tempting to make friendly content that's gentle, that lets you churn through it but not earn it. Why make something demanding if it just gets piled up in the landfill, filed in with the bland things? When games were new, they wanted a lot from you. Daunting you, taunting you, resetting and delaying you. Players played stoically. Now everyone's turned off by that. They want to burn through it quickly, a quick fix for the fickle, some tricks for the clicks of the feckless.
It's human nature to remember the bad things that happened. This is an evolutionary trait that is in every living thing. It's more important, for survival, to notice the line in the brush than it is to notice the flower you saw growing. That's the reason why we remember bad things happening to us, but don't remember the good ones. And it's the same reason why harder games are more memorable than the easy ones. I can recall most of the annoying parts in video games I've encountered, but remembering the games I ran through easily is harder. It's one of the main reasons why I play every game on the hardest difficulty. God of War quickly became one of the best games I've ever played, and disregarding that the game is very well made, with incredible gameplay, I'll remember it for a long time because it's one of the hardest games I've ever beaten. The reason games like Hollow Knight and Cuphead are remembered is not only because their charm and art style, but the way they served my ass on a diamond-crusted silver platter. Every game I've listed is very difficult, but fair. The reason players fail is purely mechanical skill, and everything is in the hands of the player to succeed. And that's why I love Getting Over It so much. It's very brutal against player, but every screw up is the player's doing, the only way to climb is to better yourself. But games are not solely remembered for their difficulty, but them being unique. Games that miss uniquity are forgotten quickly, with the most prominent examples being games like Call of Duty, FIFA and so forth. Games that are built from the ground up have more care and love put into them, and while these games still get bought, they don't have the uniquity that makes them be remembered for years to come. Bennett talks about games being made from prefabricated objects, being churned out to the people to make a quick buck. While there are examples of this happening, it isn't a massive problem now, because the games made like that aren't special.
For years now, people have been predicting that games would soon be made out of prefabricated objects, bought in a store and assembled into a world. And for the most part, that hasn't happened, because the objects in the stores are trash. I don't mean they look bad or that they're badly made, although a lot of them are. I mean they're trash in the way that food becomes trash as soon as you put it in the sink. Things are made to be consumed and used in a certain context, and once the moment is gone, they transform into garbage. In the context of technology, those moments pass by in seconds. Over time, we've poured more and more refuse into this vast digital landfill that we call the internet. It now vastly outnumbers and outweighs the things that are fresh and untainted and unused. When everything around us is cultural trash, trash becomes the new medium, the lingua franca of the digital age. And you can build culture out of trash. But only trash culture. B games, B movies, B music, B philosophy.
As technology advances and everyone can access the internet, the amount of original thoughts and ideas decreases. Despite this, Getting Over It, while taking its core from an already made game and concept in general, brings its own charm and originality. While ironically, Getting Over It is built with a jumble of assets, it's hard to tell because the game is well made. Going back to the topic at hand, we can look at Getting Over It as a metaphor for life. The repeated challenge for a reward at the end, may it be mowing your lawn, doing well on a test, or anything else. People do things for a somber moment of reflection on accomplishments. Whether small or big, after some time it just becomes the norm and you lose the feeling of accomplishing anything. Humans just work like that, looking for the next little bit of joy. The bigger the challenge, the bigger is the jolt of joy you get. After climbing the mountain for the first time, you're happy. After climbing it for the 50th time, you barely show any emotion. If you fail at an obstacle, fall down and lose some progress, some narration plays. And looking at what kind of person you are, you can either take them as Bennett mocking you or take them as guidance on what to do. It all depends if you're easily aggravated or not, and most people usually feel like they're there to make you more angry. On my first playthrough, I felt as I was getting mocked for not succeeding, which made me madder and madder, and as a result, I made more mistakes. On my further playthroughs, I started focusing on what was said and the meaning behind it. Most of the lines are inspirational quotes to make you not give up. And I'm not lying when I say these few lines of text have changed my look at the thing we call failure, with my favorite quotes being,
"Oh, it happened again. Keep on trying, don't let it get to you. The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal." C.S. Lewis. This thing that we call failure is not the falling down, but the staying down. Mary Pickford. You cannot now believe that you will ever feel better. But this is not true. You're sure to be happy again, and knowing this, truly believing it, will make you less miserable now. Abraham Lincoln. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Friedrich Nietzsche. In the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. Lewis Carroll.
honestly, with a few quotes, getting over it has changed my way of thinking more than anything else has. And it's rather incredible how a game about climbing a mountain made of trash can do that. And these are just some of the quotes that you can hear. There are many more that you can hear by playing the game. While climbing the ice mountain, Bennett says something interesting.
Have you thought about who you are in this? Are you the man in the pot, Diogenes? Are you his hand? Are you the top of his hammer? I think not. Where your hand moves, the hammer may not follow, nor the man, nor the man's hand. In this you're his will, his intent, the embodied resolve in his uphill ascent.
You can actually find some clues hinting about the man in the pot being Diogenes. During the living room section we discussed before, there are two paintings of Diogenes, one painted by a name I won't even try to pronounce, and the other by John William Waterhouse. We get the knowledge that the man in the pot is Diogenes, the Greek philosopher, who believed that true happiness is only achievable by living simply, by meeting your own needs, not the ones imposed by society. Diogenes slept in a large ceramic pot, similar to the one the character in the game sits in. But where does this tie into the game itself? Well, Diogenes lived the simplest life possible. And what did he do when an obstacle was in front of him? Well, he got over it. The game has two ways to interact with it. You either conquer the mountain, or you give up. And you don't climb for desires and superficial needs of the society, you climb for fulfillment.
Imaginary mountains build themselves from our efforts to climb them, and it's our repeated attempts to reach the summit that turns those mountains into something real.
Nothing is forcing you to play the game except your own desires. You climb because you want to climb. Similar how no one was forcing Diogenes to live as he did. To summarize, you can look at getting over it as a rage game or as a metaphor. Personally, I look at the game as a bit of both. The official store description reads, a game I made for a certain kind of person to hurt them. And I take that at face value, because the game is designed to be frustrating, but the frustration is what makes the climb interesting and makes you come back, while the same frustration is what makes you better yourself and forces you to understand how to get past something before making yourself more frustrated. Honestly, for the simplicity of the game, I will probably remember it for a long time from the anger I got, and I urge other people to give it a try. Maybe you will learn something along the way. Personal thanks to Pissy Elise and Alex McCumbers for their articles, cause my rotting brain couldn't make anything comprehensive by myself. If you wish to read them, the links are in the description below. Also sorry to everyone who was bothered by the microphone quality changing every 2 minutes. I am very lazy, so the script was recorded in a period of over 4 months.
Hope you enjoyed and understood what I was trying to say, and good luck on whatever climbs you will have in the future.